The dust has settled from the Islamic Republic of Iran's attack on Israel. This was truly an unprecedented attack that saw hundreds of suicide drones and missiles launched at Israel. And so joining us to discuss the attack and its aftermath is Jonathan Schanzer, Senior Vice President for Research at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, Jonathan, we have a lot of issues to cover, but I want to start with, a tremendous defensive military achievement for Israel. The IDF saying that 99% of the threats launched were successfully intercepted, not to mention staunch international support. Would you characterize this as a win for Israel?
It's a win, but let's caveat it. I mean, first, let's talk about the good news. And I think there was a lot of good news last night. We saw the activation of Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow, Israel's triple-layered missile defense system. It performed magnificently. It shot down 99% of the drones that entered into Israeli airspace. And then I think on top of that, it's also important to note that the Israeli public responded to the calls of the government. People went into their shelters and they stayed safe by and large. I've heard of 2 injuries, but all things equal, given the severity of the attacks, I think that the defenses went well last night. Then on top of that, I think it's important to take a look at that U.S.-led architecture or Western-led architecture that was established throughout the region over the course of years, maybe even decades. We had planes being scrambled out of Cyprus, British planes that shot down some of these UAVs and missiles. You had the Jordanians shooting down missiles last night in their airspace. U.S. Missile defenses were also activated, shooting down those drones. So in other words, what we saw was an international system that responded, an Israeli system responded, an Israeli public that responded. Here's what's missing: a counterattack. That's the thing that I think we're all going to be hearing about. There's going to be a debate between the United States and Israel right now about whether the Israelis should respond in kind, attacking Iranian bases, possibly Iranian nuclear sites. This is, of course, what Israel believes is necessary in order to establish deterrence and to teach the Islamic Republic a lesson that no one gets away with this in this difficult region that Israel is based.
And so let's discuss a potential Israeli response. I mean, Iran issued a statement saying it views the matter as closed. Israel does not, and is hoping to secure an international coalition, but it seems the U.S. May not be on board. The White House also issued a statement saying that Biden intends to coordinate a diplomatic response. And reports we've heard indicate that Biden has said the U.S. would not support an Israeli retaliation. So what do you make of all of this? And can Israel afford not to respond?
Look, I think from the Israeli perspective, the discussions that are taking place in the security cabinet, the war cabinet, they're probably saying to themselves right now that there is no way that Israel cannot respond, that they must respond to an attack of this kind of severe nature coming from the Islamic Republic. And I would also note that given that this was an historic first, that the Islamic Republic actually fired from their territory, that it grants Israel a potential window to attack in kind rather than having to tangle with these proxy groups that Israel has been fighting for decades and the Islamic Republic has been hiding behind them. So I think to some extent the Israelis see this as an opportunity, but it's a dangerous one. And I think that is what Biden is stressing right now with Netanyahu, pursuant to the reports that we've all heard, that comes with great risk, that it could potentially widen the war. It could turn the region into something much messier than it's already been. And I know that the president is trying to keep a lid on all of that. But I do think that the Israelis are likely thinking about oil refineries. They're thinking about IRGC bases. They're thinking about possible nuclear sites. They're thinking about the kinds of targets that really, I think, reveal the vulnerability of the Islamic Republic.
Mm-hmm. And so Iran, has to date tried to stay under the radar and attack only via its terror proxies, yet this marks a major escalation. So, why does Iran feel so emboldened to attack now?
Well, this is all stemming from the attack early last week, where the Israelis allegedly, although I think we all know that Israel did attack an IRGC commander who was responsible for coordinating the activities of Hezbollah and Hamas. He's fingerprints were all over the 10/7 attacks, not to mention the many attacks that came afterwards. The Israelis struck a building next to the Iranian embassy in Syria. It was not the embassy. It was very, very close, but it was not. But still, what the Islamic Republic is saying is that this was an attack on their diplomatic facility. It's not entirely believable. It's not true. But nevertheless, this is the justification that I think they're wielding right now for what they did last night. I think to some extent we may have been seeing an Islamic Republic that was simply trying to assess two things. One, whether Israel's missile defense was hermetic. In other words, if they tried to launch attacks like this in the future, would Israel be able to defend itself? And I think on that score, the Israelis have, they passed the test with flying colors. The second question, and this is what is being tested right now, is whether the president of the United States or perhaps other Western countries would stand with Israel, would join in a coalition, whether there would be a unified front in response to Iran. I think that Biden right now appears to be failing that test. Now, it doesn't mean that it's over, right? I think this is going to be a discussion. There is a deliberation that will take place between Israel and the United States and perhaps some of the other countries in the region, those Arab states that are not pleased at what they saw coming out of Iran that last night. There are reports unconfirmed that Saudi may have actually shot down a drone or two. The Jordanians defending their own airspace, I think, was very important. CENTCOM activating in a bunch of countries around the region to shoot down these missiles and drones, also important. But I think the Islamic Republic is waiting to see just how much Israel, the United States, and others are willing to stand shoulder to shoulder against them. If they smell weakness, if they see divisions, this could be a sign of things to come for the Islamic Republic in terms of further attacks and mayhem around the Middle East.
Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Jonathan Shanzer, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Pleasure.
And not just a missile strike against Israel. Over the weekend, the Islamic Republic of Iran also seized an Israeli-owned ship in the Strait of Hormuz. ILTV's William Sharon has the details.
The Islamic Republic of Iran preempted its massive attack against Israel by another act of aggression, seizing an Israeli-owned vessel on Saturday. Iran's Revolutionary Guard seized the Israeli-linked cargo ship between the United Arab Emirates and Iran, situated close to the Strait of Hormuz. The MSC Eris is a Portuguese-flagged ship owned by Goltal Shipping, an affiliated of Zodiac Maritime, which is partially owned by Israeli businessman Eyal Ofer. Iran's state-run Irana news agency announced that the Guard's helicopter boarded the ship and escorted it into Iranian waters, claiming it was linked to Israel. MSC confirmed that Iran has seized the ship and its 25 crew members, and said it was working with the relevant authorities to ensure their safe return. The seizure comes just days after Iran threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping, and mere hours before Iran launched an historic attack directly against Israel.
And U.S. President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke on the phone following the Islamic Republic's attack against Israel. In the call, the U.S. president reaffirmed his ironclad commitment to the security of Israel. But questions still loom over what role, if any, the U.S. would play in a potential Israeli retaliation. Joining us now with more on Washington's response is ILTV's Emily Schrader reporting from the United States. Emily, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here, as always.
So, Emily, we saw a really strong display of solidarity from the United States during last night's attack. I mean, what can you tell us about that?
I mean, I think what we saw was truly unprecedented, not just in terms of Iran launching a war against Israel from Iranian territory for the first time, but also the international response. I mean, the coalition, albeit informal, from Jordan, Saudi Arabia, UK, United States, shooting down these missiles and drones across the Middle East, many of them before they even reached Israel. This is quite a strong statement. It's quite a strong failure by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and I don't think that's really what they expected going into this issue. Now, in regards to President Biden's comments about not supporting an Israeli offensive action, I mean, first of all, it's not offensive, it's defensive if we're looking at how the Islamic Republic of Iran has spent the last well, really 45 years, obsessing over Israel, funding terrorist organizations, orchestrating terrorist attacks, importing weapons into the Middle East to terrorist organizations that are then used against Israeli civilians. So this is definitely not an offensive, or would not be an offensive action on the part of Israel if they were to respond. And I do think that there probably will be some sort of response. It remains to be seen what exactly that will be. But when push comes to shove, I'm pretty confident that President Biden, even with his very, very weak Iran policy throughout his administration, would not abandon Israel in this type of situation. I mean, you can't say the commitment is ironclad at the same time you're saying, but we're not going to support an operation against Iran. Don't forget, Biden is in an election year. It's a very contentious election, and he's under tremendous pressure from the far, far left groups in the United States on the issue of Israel over this ongoing Gaza war. But I do think that when push comes to shove, we're not going to see Biden turn us back on the state of Israel.
And Emily, I know that you follow what's happening in Iran very closely. I mean, what are you hearing from the people of Iran, not the Islamic regime, but from the people of Iran over Iran's attack yesterday?
So since the attack started, there has been a massive outpouring of support from Iranians, in particular across social media. I have had hundreds of messages. I haven't even gotten through all of them from Iranians, saying that they hope Israelis are safe and they're sorry for what their regime has done and they want nothing to do with it and they want to overthrow this regime. Incidentally, I actually did a poll in Persian yesterday prior to the strikes, asking in Persian if Iranians would support direct strikes on IRGC sites within Iranian territory. And then throughout the time of that poll was when Iran actually struck Israel. Now, the responses to that this morning that I saw were that 85% of 10,000 respondents said that they would support such a strike. And you see in the comments to these types of posts and other similar polls that have been conducted just in the last 24 hours that there is tremendous support for the state of Israel from the people of Iran, both in the diaspora and on the ground in Iran. And furthermore, remarkably, there's a lot of support for Israel's right to self-defense. The Iranian people want to get rid of this regime. They want this regime to fall, and they view Israel as one of the tools that can help them overthrow this regime. I think that if we do see an Israeli response, it's very likely we're going to see some protests erupt in the streets again. I mean, don't forget the same week that Iran launched this war against Israel, they also began a new campaign of hijab crackdown in the streets of Iran. Police are everywhere in the streets, arresting even the wives and daughters of celebrities in Iran. So there's a massive oppressive crackdown going on internally as well as externally.
All right, well, interesting analysis coming from Iran. Emily, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thanks.
And not just from the United States, the attack has also put world leaders' support for Israel to the test. Joining us now from Tel Aviv is ILTV's Rachel Safdie for more on the global reactions. Rachel, thank you for joining us. So how did the leaders of the world react to Iran's attack on Israel? And what was the reaction on the streets?
Hi, Lidar. Well, when it comes to world leaders, we've actually seen them greatly supporting Israel in this first ever attack coming straight from Iranian soil. We heard from the US, the UK, Japan, the Netherlands, Denmark, France, all of these countries sharing not only their support with Israel, but some countries actually actively helping, right? As we saw the US and the UK, Jordan, very, very openly helping Israel to defend themselves from these drones and putting down these drones and missiles before they make their way towards Israeli territory. Even though President Joe Biden has said he wouldn't support an Israeli counterattack to Iran, because as we understand, he doesn't want to, see a greater war or a greater escalation coming out of this attack. We do see legislators in the U.S. calling for a bill to help Israel now monetarily even more. We haven't heard anything from the Squad, which is the group of Democrats in the House of Representatives that usually stand very much against Israel or giving them any sort of aid, even if it's defensive aid. We know that the UN Security Council is meeting today at the request of the Israeli ambassador. And so those are all things that we've been seeing. We do see some great support of leaders, of world leaders to Israel.
Thank you for the update, Rachel. And moving on, despite the Iranian attack, IDF operations in the Gaza Strip have not halted as we reach day 191 of the war in Gaza, and the IDF continues targeting Hamas military infrastructure as well as remaining Hamas battalions. Meanwhile, Hamas officially announced it rejects the latest hostage for ceasefire deal. More on this report from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Despite the aerial attacks launched by Iran, the war in Gaza against Hamas is still ongoing. The 162nd Division remains in the Gaza Strip, conducting precise operations to eliminate remaining Hamas battalions. On Saturday, troops from the Nahal Brigade destroyed Hamas terrorist infrastructure, including a weapons storage facility, and seized additional military equipment belonging to the terrorist organization. During precise operations in Bet Hanun in the northern Gaza Strip, IDF troops used a drone to locate several armed terrorists operating in the area. An IAF aircraft struck the terrorists and eliminated them. IDF strikes have been precisely targeting terror operatives, striking yesterday a rocket launcher containing 20 rockets that were ready to launch to central Israel. The humanitarian efforts have likewise remained ongoing, as over the last week, the IDF, in cooperation with Kojat, facilitated the entry of approximately 1,866 humanitarian aid trucks through the Nitzana and Kerem Shalom crossings. In addition, 1,463 food packages were airdropped into the Strip. The IDF has been consistently providing humanitarian aid and assisting to residents in Gaza despite impending threats from other fronts. And amid the Iranian attack on Israel, Hamas has rejected the recently proposed hostage deal mediated by the US, Egypt, and Qatar. This latest update comes a week after the relevant parties meet in Cairo. The Prime Minister's office stated that Hamas's latest rejection reflects Sinwar's disinterest in proceeding with any deal, and that Hamas is only interested in further regional escalations.
Hamas rejecting yet another ceasefire deal. And moving on, after an intense 24-hour search for missing 14-year-old shepherd Binyamin Achimael, his body was discovered in the same region where he went missing with severe violent wounds. More in the following report.
Intense search parties were conducted on Friday after the 14-year-old shepherd was declared missing when he was last spotted leaving his home. The IDF confirmed on Saturday, after locating the body using a drone, that the boy's body was discovered with severe violent wounds. The investigation was forwarded to the Shin Bet as the IDF declared the murder a terrorist attack. Achimael's vanishing sparked a wave of violence between Israelis and Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. Cars were set on fire in the Palestinian village of Duma, and one person was killed by active gunfire in deadly clashes. An additional 25 people were injured in these clashes. Prime Minister Netanyahu commented on the murder, stating, "The abominable murder of Binyamin Achimael is a serious crime. I send my heartfelt condolences to his family." The Prime Minister added, "The IDF and Shin Bet forces are in an extensive pursuit of the despicable murderers and all those who cooperated with them." Defense Minister Yoav Gallant also issued a statement saying the security system will find the murderer and bring him to justice. He further added, "Retaliatory actions will make it harder for our soldiers in their mission. We must not take the law into our own hands."
May he rest in peace. And for our final story tonight, as Israelis woke up today to a new reality in the Middle East following the Islamic Republic of Iran's massive attack, ILTV's Ariel Elachiani hit the streets of Tel Aviv to see how Israelis are reacting to the aftermath. Let's take a look.
Last night was weird in that there was a lot of cognitive dissonance. Like, everyone in my apartment was, partying and getting ready to go out, but we're also like, okay, everyone, be careful, beware where the shelters are. And then later, everyone came back from the bar and was watching the Iron Dome doing its thing. So it's a lot of conflicting emotions all at once, but I'm just grateful I can walk around safe today, basically.
The hardest part was the waiting, the anticipation was far worse than the attack. I think we all were pretty confident that Iran wasn't going to hit us hard because they know what was going to happen to them. And I think just the end, it's like anything else, the waiting and the anticipation was the hardest on myself and my family.
And kind of weird, I don't know. It was like a surprising in the middle of the night, like 1 a.m. Everybody woke up like in the entire country and said like on every telegram and news and everything to be aware of what's gonna happen, and gave us alarm of 2 hours before it's gonna happen. So it was scary. It was nothing like happened before, you know.
I'm totally confident. This is a crisis-tested country. They know how to handle adversity and situations like this, and far better than anywhere else I've lived. I mean, you know, we look around today, people are shopping, people are eating, they're out getting coffee. You know, in most countries, they'd be hiding in the cellars, you know. This is a different country. This is a resilient place.